Hello, good morning. How are you guys doing today? I have my coffee here that I'm going to be drinking during the live because uh, last night I went to meet a friend. We went to kind of like a rock concert. Not a concert. Here in Chile, they have a word. Hello, welcome. They have a word for like a small venue when someone's performing music. So I went to that with a friend and it was just very late. So I am someone that needs a lot of sleep. And then I woke up very sleepy, especially when you're in a place with like a lot of music and a lot of people. Yeah, it was really fun. I'll post a video on my story for you guys to see. I was very close to the musicians and it was like kind of heavier music than I would normally listen to, but I feel that you can't go wrong with live music. I love live music. One of the groups was called, the one that my friend was like there to see was called Moplo, and they're based in Santiago, Chile, and they have kind of like, I don't know if it's metal, like punk. It's more punk rock kind of music. The other groups, I don't know. They were new to me. Okay, how to use best in a sentence without confusing it with most. The idea is that best has most in the word, but it has an additional idea. So best means most good. Yeah, that's how I would think about it. So most, you need to add a thing or an adjective. You need to say, I have the most patience out of everyone I know. Or I am the most outstanding swimmer. I'm not. This is an example. So with most, you have to talk about that it's the majority of some sort of object, or it can combine with a longer adjective. But best is generally going to go before just an object, a noun, because it's like the most good of this thing. So yeah, I don't know. If anyone here has an example that contrasts best and good, feel free to include it in the chat. That might be helpful for people to see. Hello from Japan. Nice to see you. Do I know any words in Arabic or Turkish? I know I took like a very short course in Arabic one summer, but most of what we got through was like the alphabet. So I know like bab is door and then kitab is book. I don't know any Turkish, actually. I have had a couple of students that speak Turkish, but I don't speak Turkish. When do you study best? Yeah, you could say that. When do you study best? Like, what is the preferred or most good time for you to study? So those two questions would be different. When do you study most is like, when is the quantity of how much you study the most? So you could say, I study most, or I study the most on the weekends because I have more time. But if I say, when do you study the best? It's like, when is the quality of your studying good? So, oh, I study the best in the mornings before my baby sister wakes up. So, are you talking about quantity or are you talking about quality? I would say that's the difference there. Hello, how are you guys doing today? What was I? Oh yeah, last week I wasn't live. I was doing a workshop, which was very interesting. I have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of Brazilian colleagues on Instagram, and they're very knowledgeable teachers. I feel like the English teacher scene in Brazil has a lot of very knowledgeable people. So that was great. Her name is Livia. She has a page on here. She and Sergio, they were running the workshop about output. Okay, here's the thing, and I don't know if anyone else agrees with this about when there's a language that's similar to a language you know, it's easier to understand the language, but you kind of tune out how to speak the language. So this happens to me a lot with Portuguese, where because I can recognize words like coração is coração and stuff like that, then when someone is talking to you in Portuguese, you're like, you kind of don't pay attention to the meanings of words because you're like, oh, it's similar enough. So I find that, yeah, it's harder for me to remember and to hold on to words in Portuguese when I'm hearing them because my brain is like, oh, that's similar to Spanish. I understand it. And I feel like I need to pay more attention to like holding on and retaining the words. Because that can happen a lot when you're like, oh, I understand it. You kind of don't put in the necessary effort to remember something. I want to learn Spanish. Yeah, okay. So, by the way, everyone, I'm an English teacher, but related to learning Spanish, I think that honestly, it's interesting because with different languages, you have to learn different things early on. Like with English, a lot of the time we start with the present simple and okay, here are the simple verbs, and then we need to use do or don't for questions and negatives. In Spanish, you don't need to learn a different form for questions and negatives, which is nice, but you do have to learn how to conjugate verbs. So like, yo hablo, tú hablas. Honestly, I recommend music with Juanes Es por ti. His music is very like simple in terms of the vocabulary, so Juanes music. And also, I think whenever you're wanting to learn a new language, getting really interested in the cultures that speak the language will make it more interesting and it will help you understand how people think more in that language. So, luckily in Spanish, that's really easy to do because there is such a rich culture in different Spanish speaking countries. Like, you can learn from music, you can learn from films. Yeah, okay. But yeah, that's my advice. If anyone else has advice, feel free to write it in the chat. I study English every single day and I will try to have a little time while I go to my workplace. So for me, it's essential to focus on quality than quantity. Yeah. So I think that's one thing that is interesting. I have a student right now and I'm very proud of him. He told me from last year to this year, he's been listening a lot to podcasts on his way to work because he has a long commute. A commute is a journey to work. And because he's been traveling so much to work, he has really improved his listening abilities. And so now he's able to listen a lot more. Which advice? Okay, this is also another tip. In English, advice is never plural. It's never advices. So you could say, what advice do you have? Would be good. What advice do you have? Tips could be plural. What tips? So for working with native English speakers, I guess it depends on in what context. Like, is it an office situation, a call center situation? That could also change. Really, for working with people that speak very quickly, especially English speakers that are not maybe aware of how fast they're speaking, I would say one thing that really helps is practicing your listening as much as you can. So podcasts. And I say that because all of my students that listen a lot to podcasts in 6 months, 9 months have had very obvious differences in their ability to listen. And I also experienced this myself with learning Spanish, that listening a lot is very helpful. And I also think if listening to a really fast podcast with a bunch of native English speakers is really hard, you can start with a podcast that's a little more for English learners. Like there's one called Thinking in English. There are a lot of podcasts, and you can kind of choose the accent. Like in your case, if you're listening to a lot of people from the US and that's what's hard, it could be useful to find one with US accent. Also, I think what's difficult in the US corporate world, and if anyone else here has this experience, definitely share your thoughts. Another thing that's really hard for a lot of people is that people use a lot of idioms and phrasal verbs. So I think it will be a matter of paying attention to which ones your coworkers use a lot and trying to keep track or remember those. Yeah, because noticing is very helpful. When you're learning a language, if you're observant and able to notice what people are using and how they're talking, that's going to really come in handy. And stealing their phrases to use yourself. If they're always saying, like, let's get the ball rolling, it's like, okay, I'm going to use that next time. And I would say even challenge yourself to use them. Like if you learn a new idiom or phrase that everyone is using, try to make it a personal challenge to use it. Another thing is language is a very rhythmic thing, and it helps a lot to imitate people and like use your own voice to imitate the sounds that you're hearing. It makes you more aware of the sounds. So if you're hearing a lot of connected speech, like, where'd you go? Where'd you go? You yourself practicing that, there have been studies that show students that specifically practice their connected speech are better at listening to fast English as well. Yeah, a lot of idioms, especially corporate idioms. You could also, here's the thing, any real life situation that you have, try to prepare specifically for that real life situation. That can help you if, like, we're all using English not just because we love the language of English. A lot of you guys are learning English also as a tool to be able to do other things in life. I want to live in an English-speaking country. I want to work, or another reason, I want to travel. So seeing it as, okay, what are the tasks that I have to do if I want to achieve my goals? And that can make it less scary. So if you need to have a lot of meetings in English, watching videos of people in meetings or tips for meetings, and you'll hear a lot of the same words repeat as long as you're looking for content that is in the context that you want to learn about. Would you recommend learning vocabulary in a classic way with a vocabulary notebook? To be honest, I mean, I'm someone where writing down words does help me remember them. I think that for me, it depends on what you're writing in the vocabulary notebook. If you do go that route, I would recommend instead of just word definition to include examples, maybe the real context where you saw the word, what other words does it remind me of, and kind of trying to, and in what situation could I use this word myself? Like trying to add more context to connect the word to real life. And I think that's one thing where a lot of students have a big gap between what they know in that they can recognize and what they can use. So it's about how can we use this vocabulary notebook to make these words useful for me so that I can use them in my next conversation. And I think as long as you're kind of incorporating a little bit of that, it would be a very useful tool. But yeah, I think anything you guys are motivated to do that you find would help your memory, I say go for it. Do you think the ability for speaking in a native language has anything to do when speaking in English? Definitely, yeah. If you are a person who tends to be very shy and introverted, of course, it can be difficult to have an English class about small talk and try to think of, if you were to go up to a stranger, what would you say? Like, this could be hard to put into context for you if you're like, I'm really not a very talkative person anyway. I've had students like this also, where we are talking and, share about yourself, and they're not the type of person to share about themselves. What I will say though is that in order to get, like, from my perspective as a teacher, in order to get those students who don't really talk about themselves that much to speak more, sometimes it's helpful to ask them to talk about different things, like talk about the news, talk about your opinion or a scenario. So that could be a little helpful if you're the type of person that's not realistically going to share a lot of stories about yourself. It could also be helpful to, there are so many other topics that we can talk about. I also think if you're struggling with that, if you're like, well, I'm just such a quiet person, I honestly think something that helps a lot with fluency, which also helped me with my fluency in Spanish, is to kind of let go of your identity sometimes when you're practicing. Not that you have to let it go forever, but for instance, if you're doing an activity, a speaking activity in class, kind of experimenting with a different version of yourself. Even if you are a quiet person, like we all have so many different sides to our personalities that learning another language as an excuse to see, in German, I'm a very serious, stoic person, but I'm going to kind of see how it feels to be emotional when I'm speaking in Spanish today, or I'm going to kind of imitate how I've seen Miley Cyrus speaking. So I do think that learning another language is kind of nice in that way because it gives you more, like as adults, we don't always play and experiment, and it gives you this excuse to do that. I worked with a native Californian colleague who spoke fast, and I would just agree with everything he said, even if I didn't understand at first. That actually helped me a lot. I have done that as well. I think that at work, maybe just saying, okay. Yeah, obviously it's better to ask people to clarify, but I also understand if you've asked someone like 6 times and you don't want to ask again, maybe like, okay, shoot me an email about it later. Thanks. I understand when I hear English, I can write too with some grammar mistakes, but when it comes to speaking, I'm slow and struggle to come up with the right words. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because speaking requires other skills, right? So a lot of people struggle with writing and speaking because both are skills where you need to produce something, and that's more difficult than recognizing what other people say to you. Like when I talk to you, yes, it can be difficult to listen to people, of course, especially if they speak quickly. But as long as you know the words that I'm saying, you can kind of recognize them, and you yourself are not needing to put together the sentence, versus when it's your turn to speak, you have to arrange everything. But I also think with speaking, it's even more challenging than writing for a lot of people because you're on the spot and you have to use your voice, and it feels very vulnerable. So a lot of people go blank when they're needing to speak. Really, it is something that you just need to practice more. And yeah, it's something that comes with time of practicing more, because one of the skills that you need when speaking is to be able to retrieve vocabulary in the moment. So if you are in a conversation and you're talking and you want to say it's a sunny day outside, but you can't remember the word sunny, and you're like, I don't know, where's the word? That is something you can practice. It's something where the more you practice speaking out loud, either in English classes or even recording yourself, that ability to recall and retrieve words in the moment is really helpful. A lot of people practice their speaking by writing a monologue or something and then recording themselves. I think if you want to practice certain things like your voice, having a more confident voice, your intonation, your pronunciation, I think that's totally fine. But that is not going to help you with that need to have automatic speech in a conversation. So recently, there's a teacher named Colin that I follow on here, and he had a really good video about this, that a lot of people think that they are not very fluent in their speaking in English because they're translating too much from their native language, which is true. That's like part of the story, right? Sometimes we're trying to say something and it's like, that's too hard, so I'm going to rely on what I know in my native language. But there's also another part of the story, which is that the automaticity of speaking in the moment and like having words that you can use on the spot to reply, that's something that you can practice. You can get sharper at having words occur to you the more that you practice that exact skill of improvising. So yeah, that's a skill that's really going to help you if you, and a lot of people say, well, I don't have anyone to practice my English with. And I know it can be more motivating to have other people to practice with, for sure. But there are really important skills with speaking that you can also practice by yourself. And one of those is this ability to automatically say words. That's something that you can practice at home. The more mistakes you make, the faster you learn. That's true. Okay, here's the thing. A student who doesn't make mistakes is not a student who knows more. That is a student who is just being quiet. So all of us, if we sign up for an English class or any class, we're going there to learn, right? So we're recognizing I'm not at the place that I want to be. I want to get to this place, but I'm here. Yeah, of course, in order to get there, you're not going to be able to perform at that level without the struggle that it takes to get to that level. And I know it sounds like a cliche. Everyone says, oh, mistakes are important, and it's difficult to really feel that way while you're making mistakes. But I'll give you an example. Also, hi, Joao. How are you doing today? I'll give you an example. When I have an English class and the students in the class, imagine I bring a topic like we're going to talk about your weekend. If the students in the class are very comfortable the whole time and they're just talking about their weekends and everything they say is accurate, I don't feel like that is the right level of a class for them. In fact, a better level is to push people a little bit more. So if I ask you, how was your weekend? And you're like, my weekend was good. I went to the beach and I spent time with my family. Then my idea is a good way for you to practice is you're kind of in the safe zone. You're speaking very accurately, but you also, in order to get to a more advanced level and have more vocabulary, you have to be pushed to the limit, be pushed to the point where you're unsure about something. Because as a teacher, I'm only going based off of what you're saying. So I want to find that limit of knowledge. Where are you unsure? How can we get you to the point where you're making mistakes? The workshop that I attended last week, I liked the word that they used, which was hypothesis. So you come into a situation with a specific hypothesis. You're like, I think that we always say I was and you were. That's correct. We always say I was and you were. And then you're in the English class and you're talking about conditionals. And the teacher says, if I were you, I would do this. And you're like, wait, that's not what I believe. Like, I had this other perception of how things are. That's your moment of learning and questioning what you thought before. So those moments are like gold. You could have them in a class or you could have them outside of a class by yourself by, speaking or writing something down and checking with, ChatGPT or with Google corrections and seeing where are my mistakes, because where is the difference between what I think and the more common, correct way to say things, and finding that is your way forward. A lot of people hit this plateau where they feel like they can't improve their language skills anymore. And that happens because when you're a beginner getting to an intermediate level, you're like, okay, I just want to find the words to be able to express my ideas. But then it's easy to stay in that safe zone, to continue to recycle the same vocabulary and use what you know works. But if you do want to advance more, you have to find a new way to challenge yourself, which is looking at the unknown. What are the words and phrases that I'm not sure about, and trying to experiment with them? Especially if you have an English class and you're able to make those mistakes and get corrected, that's also very helpful. Question is that I've been facing some problems of using tenses which are present perfect and past perfect. Okay, this is a great question. So my approach to tenses, I think a lot of people's approach, this is not like my invented approach, but my approach to tenses is instead of just, we're not learning tenses just for the sake of learning tenses, right? Like, you're not learning tenses just so that you know grammar. You're learning tenses because they are tools to help you express your ideas in a more accurate way. So, for example, if I want to ask you, did you see the movie or have you seen the movie? Did is used more for a specific past event versus have you seen the movie is a more open general question. So it's better for me to know that difference when I'm in a real conversation talking to someone. Okay, do I want to ask them a general question? Or maybe they told me they're seeing a movie and I want to show them that I remember that they told me this, and so I'm going to use did. Because if someone tells you, Maggie, I'm going to see Batman this weekend, come the next week, and I'm like, have you seen Batman? Were you listening to me? I told you I was going to see it. It's better to say, did you see Batman last week? I'm thinking about a specific event instead of just a general question, right? So those are the situations when it's very helpful to know verb tenses. How can it help you? How can it contribute to the way that you express yourself? So thinking about, for example, and if anyone here has an example with the present perfect tense, please share. So one situation when it's really useful to use the present perfect is this one here that Pereira wrote. How have you been? This is a very useful question. The present perfect in conversations is very useful. How have you been? I'm talking about from the past until now. So instead of only how are you right now, that's okay. You can say right now I'm good. But how have you been is a better question if I see someone that I know and we haven't talked for a couple of weeks, and I want to know basically for these days how this person has been. So that's going to be a really useful way to remember how have you been, or remember how to use the present perfect in a conversation. Think about someone who you know that you haven't seen for a couple weeks and what kind of catch-up questions you can ask them. How have you been? How has your son been? That's a really good kind of chunk to remember. How have or has this thing been? Very good question in the present perfect for daily life. Then we have you ever seen a ghost? Okay. So that's another use of the present perfect. So we have, how have you been? I'm checking in from past until now. And then, have you ever seen a ghost? I'm talking about an experience in your whole life. Have you ever done this? I have never been to the US. Have you ever tried sushi? So those are also experiences, like life experiences. I've never been to the US. I've never tried sushi, or I have tried sushi. In my case, I have. These are talking about in all of your life, but not a specific time when. I don't have enough information. It's a general question. I've been considering, I would say I've been considering it, or I've been thinking about it, and I've decided to do it. Yeah. So it's also really useful for, this goes back to the catching up one. How have you been? Recently or these days, I've been considering this problem, or I've been considering this decision. I have followed your tips and it has really worked. Nice. That's another one where we're not giving a specific time, but we're just saying in general, this is something that I have done. Do you used to make the shorter way of have or not the contraction? Yeah, in general, I always use contractions in my speech when I'm talking to friends or family. Like, I always use contractions. The only time when I don't use a contraction is, for instance, if I want to emphasize. So if you're like, Maggie, I know that you have tried sushi. I know that you have tried sushi. And I say, no, I have not. If you really want to emphasize, you could not use the contraction. But 9 times out of 10 in a normal conversation, people are going to be using contractions. And that's a good thing to practice, not just for you to sound a certain way, but to get more comfortable and familiar with hearing the contractions. I have been studying a lot recently, or lately. Have you tried sushi? I have. English tends to give you amazing possibilities to express things without being forced to use extra vocabulary. Yeah, that's true. So it's nice. You can be really specific and say exactly what you want with this tense. That's how we have to see tenses, not like this weird, complicated chart to memorize, even though that's how a lot of people learned them in school, but rather as something that's like a useful tool for you to express yourself in a more specific way. How about 2 tenses, past perfect and past perfect? 2 points, like I had finished cooking. Yeah. I had finished cooking lunch before my husband arrived at home. Yeah, okay, so that is the reason why the present perfect is so common, is because we use it in these situations where something started in the past and continues until now, and also when we had a general experience. So very useful for conversations, the present perfect. I actually, on my page, have a pinned video about the present perfect. The past perfect is useful also, but it's more specific. Because the past perfect you can only use when there are 2 past events. You're talking about the past of the past. So if I'm just saying, yesterday I went to the beach, I will not say yesterday I had gone to the beach, because I need to use the past perfect when I'm talking about the past of the past. Like, there's another thing that happened and this happened before it. So it's a more specific situation when we use the past perfect. It's used a lot with by the time or already. So I had already cooked dinner by the time my husband came home. Those are really good time markers with the past perfect. It's really useful, the past perfect. Imagine this situation. Okay, there is a murder. Okay, there is a murder in your neighbor's house, and you went to your neighbor's house, but when you got there, the murderer was not there. Okay? The police come and they talk to you, and they're like, did you see anyone leaving the house when you went to your neighbor's house where the crime happened? If you say, when I came, the murderer or the criminal was leaving, or when I came, the murderer left, that's not very clear, because perhaps these 2 things happened at the same time. I came and the murderer is like, okay, bye, I'm gonna go. So in order to be very clear that one thing happened before the other thing, the best option is to say, by the time I went to my neighbor's house, or when I arrived at my neighbor's house, the murderer had left or had already left. I'm being very clear that the murderer came, killed my neighbor. Sorry, I don't know why this is the example. The murderer came, killed my neighbor, left, and then I came. And so that is when it's really useful to use the past perfect. It's important that one thing happened before another thing. And another example, for instance, is if you had a situation that changed something in your life. Like, this is also a dumb example, but if this weekend I saw Lord of the Rings, and I tell you, oh, this weekend I saw Lord of the Rings, you could ask me, had you ever seen it before? So if you imagine a timeline, this is present. Past, I saw Lord of the Rings. Before that, I had never seen Lord of the Rings. And then it changed this weekend when I saw Lord of the Rings. That's another situation when we can use the past perfect. It's like we had a past thing and then a different past thing happened before that. When I came home, I had seen the criminal leaving. In this case, because I had seen means that it happened before the criminal, or before you came home. So it wouldn't really make sense because when you come home, that's when you see the situation. So you could say, when I came home, I saw that the criminal had already left. That would be a good sentence. So I came home and I saw, those both happened in that instance in the past. And I saw what? I saw that previous to my arrival, the criminal had already left. I would say it like that. When I came home, I saw that the criminal had already left. What is the difference between I'm working now and I'm worked now? I'm working now means that right now, currently, you are in the process of working. I'm worked is not grammatical. So you will not use the word work with the ed after I'm. So only the first one would be a correct sentence. If you wanted to say I worked, you could, or I have worked in the past. So if you wanted to use the past forms, that would be a different thing. But yeah, only the first one makes sense out of those two options. The difference between has been and had been. That's the difference between the present perfect and the past perfect. So has been, like it has been a good day so far. I'm talking about something that started in the past and continues until now. Or I could say she has been to Mexico. It's like something that happened at an unspecified time in the past. So has been has these two really important uses. One is something that started in the past and continues until now. You could use it with so far, since, or for to talk about duration of time. She has been in Chile for 2 years. She has been in Chile since 2015. Or an unspecified past situation. So she has been to Chile 2 times, but I'm not saying specifically when. So the present perfect with has been has those two important uses, and had been is that specific one that I mentioned to you guys that we need a past event, and that's the past of the past. So I had been to Chile before moving back here. So when I use had been, I need a past event, and I'm talking about something before that past event. So that's like a more specific one to use. I speak English fluently with a very good accent, but the only thing that comes to be an actual challenge for me is that English word has a word for everything, literally everything. That's okay. I think that is very real. It gets frustrating when you spend so much time learning a language and it's like, oh my God, there's another word? What? This is a new word? I would say 2 things about that. One is that we can change our vision about vocabulary because even for people that are native speakers, even for people that read a lot in English, when I'm reading a novel, sometimes I still see a new word, or a word that I'm not completely comfortable using myself, but I've seen other people use. So that is a lifetime. And in a way, that's kind of liberating if you guys don't have this vision, like, I have to know every word in English, and you're like, I never will know every word in English. It's kind of nice because you're not holding yourself to this impossible standard because no one knows every word in English. There are new words also all the time. So the other thing, I was going to say two things, and now I don't remember the second one. The other thing is we can use this as a way to be more curious. So people that are really curious about language, that is such a positive quality to have. I've noticed there are differences in students that I've had where they see new unknown information. The people who completely shut down and they are uncomfortable with that and they're like, no, another thing that I don't know. They tend to not have as many positive outcomes when they have to have confidence in speaking. But people that approach those situations with curiosity, yeah, it's such a powerful thing. Everything where you're like, I'm confused. I actually, maybe this is too much information, but once I had a therapist that told me instead of judging things to say, I'm curious about this. And it became a joke with my friends where we would see some terrible behavior and say, I'm curious about the way that he's cheating on his girlfriend or something like that. So I think maybe that also could be helpful. Yeah. What is more used? Okay, wait. How to overcome social anxiety when speaking English in group meetings? Yeah, that is hard. I think that is such an individual thing where for each of us we have to have these moments where we are able to break through our social anxiety. I would say this. One thing that I think is helpful is try to start small. So don't have the idea that you need to raise your hand and give a long speech. I think that is going to make something feel more daunting. Try to start small. Just make a little side comment like, yes, I agree with what you're saying, or have a couple of phrases in your back pocket that you hear other people use a lot, like, I second him, or yes, I piggyback on his idea, or a couple of these kind of shorter expressions that you can try to challenge yourself to use in a meeting and try to start small, if possible. Obviously, it depends on your workplace. I would also say try to congratulate yourself for the small things. If you leave a meeting and you're like, wow, I talked once today, try to see that as progress and like recognize your progress instead of just looking at the end goal and seeing where you are as like a failure or something like that. I would also say know that it takes time. And I've used this phrase before, but the only way out is through. So it's like you're on one side of the forest. On the other side of the forest, you're speaking in meetings. How can you get from where you are to the other side of the forest? You have to go through and speak in meetings. You can break that into smaller pieces, like I said, trying to make smaller comments instead of trying to take more attention for yourself in the meeting, because that might be kind of scary. But yeah, if anyone else has had that experience, I'm curious if you have anything that you would add. Does anyone here have an experience with this issue of like having anxiety speaking up in meetings? I would also say another thing that I would say is when you're talking, a lot of us focus a lot on every word and having the perfect grammar, when really I would focus on the message and trying to get the message across. And another thing that's helpful is if you say a sentence and people are not sure what you mean, you can always add an example or add details. I think that's a really good way to kind of elaborate on your ideas. So even if you say something, like the worst thing that happens, you say something and people are like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Okay, we can add another detail. I can add an example. Like there's always a way to get out of the situation as well. But again, I think it's hard because, yeah, that fear is going to be there the first few times. And so it's like, how can I breathe through it and have my sweaty palms and still try to contribute something? And I will say, this is one of those reasons why learning a language is so much more than just gaining a skill in speaking a language. It goes beyond that to things like personal self-confidence. When you are able to contribute in a conversation in English, it makes it look way easier in your native language. So every time you have a new challenge that looks like it's going to be difficult and you're able to meet that challenge, it's like you're proving to yourself that you can do something more and that the other situations in your life are not maybe as scary as you thought before. So I do think it's really rewarding after you do it. I have thought though, I have thought about making a video and I think this would be a great one. I've done like a meditation before. And I think that some sort of like listen to this before going into a meeting in English and then like a bunch of affirmations. So I think that could be a good, if there, maybe there are meditations like that as well. This is a good, yeah, I was very surprised that I was not only the one person with the fear to speak. 80% of the group were also scared. Yeah, definitely. And even sometimes when you're talking to people and it looks like they know what they're talking about, sometimes they also are not super comfortable speaking. Yeah, you can always, I think it's this one time I was speaking to a salesman. It was going well, then all of a sudden I went blank. I was trying to talk about some specific thing and I had to start again. And I think that that's totally fine. Yeah, sometimes it's hard because I know sometimes it feels like a really high stakes situation when you're at work, like people won't be understanding. Let me see. Yeah. So I was thinking with anyway versus anyways. I got the question whether anyway and anyways are interchangeable. They are used in the same way. I believe anyway, let me see, okay, anyway without the S on the end is standard, correct, and widely accepted in formal and informal English. You can use it to return to a topic, like anyway, as I was saying, or to mean it doesn't matter. So, or despite that, like I was tired, but I went anyway. And to change or close a conversation, like anyway, I should get going. Anyways is technically not standard, but it's very common, especially in the US and Canada, I believe. So I think it's like North American. It can sound a little bit more informal and softer, like more playful in that way. Like, anyways, let's start the meeting. So yeah, I would say anyway is generally the correct one, but if you listen to conversations with people from North America in particular, anyways is very common, especially in conversation rather than in a presentation or something like that. I've heard that anyways just a word that teens started using it. That teens started using. I think it's, to be honest, anyways is more than only teenagers. Like you could also hear someone that's like an adult using it, but it's informal. It's not like the correct one. Could you give an example of it? So, of if so and if not so. You'll know when to use anyways. My American friends always say anyways. Yeah, I always say anyways. That's why Wanted to check because I wasn't sure if it's a North American thing or if it's a global English thing because I wasn't quite sure about that, but it seems like it's more of a North American thing to say anyways. Yeah, if so, this is interesting because a lot of words in English, including like really short words, can be used in a lot of different ways, and so is one of those words where it has a lot of meanings beyond, so let's talk about this. Or he is so cool. So, for instance, if I tell you, do you like pineapple on pizza? If so, let's order something. Like, if this is true, if this is correct, if this is reality. Do you like pineapple on pizza? If so, let's order some. Can you explain the subjunctive? I wish she is to be a good mom. I hope she is a good mom. So, hope does not use the subjunctive in English, which might be confusing if you speak a language like a Romance language. Yeah, hope is always just, it's with regular clause after. So like, I hope she is okay. So we conjugate the verb normally. Instead of just saying she is okay, I hope she is okay. So with I hope, it's similar to I think she is okay. I hope she is okay. And it's optional to use that in those situations. With wish, it's the subjunctive. So if you're talking about a wish in the present tense, the way we show subjunctive in English with the word wish and also with only is to create a distance from the present reality by pushing something further into the past. So I wish she were a good mom. Or if we're talking about the past, remember that the past perfect we said was the past of the past. I wish she had been a good mom when I was growing up. So wish is going to go with the past tenses, and hope is going to go with the present or future. Something that you don't know in the present or something that hasn't yet happened. Oh yeah, also in the past. I hope you enjoyed your trip yesterday. So hope will be with the past. I hope you enjoyed your trip yesterday, but it's something that you don't know the answer to versus wish. Wish is like, maybe you didn't enjoy your trip yesterday and it's like, I wish you had enjoyed. I want to change something. I hope is like, I don't know, but I have this desire that it's like this. So that's the difference. I hope you enjoyed your trip yesterday, but I don't know about it. I hope you are doing well, because I don't know the answer to that. Or I hope we will have a good time. Versus wish is used with something that did happen that you wish that you would change. And same thing with if only. So if only I had started studying English sooner, or I wish I had started studying English sooner. Hope can be used with the past, present, or future. Hope is used with something that I want, but maybe I don't know the answer to. So in the past, it's something where I don't know if it happened, but I want that this happened. Oh, I hope you had a good trip. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but that's what I want. Or in the present, I hope that you are doing okay right now. Or in the future, something that hasn't happened yet. So that's how to use hope. Something that I don't know in the past or present, or something that I want in the future. Wish is similar to ojalá, exactly. Yeah. And similar to, like, I'm just thinking in Spanish how you say like, ojalá que tengas esto, or ojalá que tuvieras esto. In English, we also do that where it's like, I wish you were nicer in the present. I wish you had been nicer in the past. I wonder is like, I think to myself, like, I'm curious about something. This is a really good word to use if you guys ever want to start small talk and have a conversation with someone. You could say, I wonder what time the meeting starts. I'm curious. I'm asking myself this question. I wonder if dinosaurs really did exist. I wonder if the Earth is flat. Uh, so, like, when you're curious about something or asking yourself a question, I wonder is a really good conversation starter. Uh, when to use I guess. Yeah, I wonder if the Earth is flat. I guess is like, it could be used in different ways. For instance, if I tell you like, "Oh, it's so great that it's finally hot outside," you could say, "I guess, I suppose, maybe, yeah, it's okay." It's like if you're not fully convinced, you could say, "I guess," as a response to someone. You could also say, "I guess that." It's basically to say something that you're not sure of, but that maybe you have an idea. So I guess that it wasn't really a good idea to come early to this event. It's like, maybe I think that maybe it wasn't quite a good idea. I guess that it wasn't really a good idea. But I do notice a lot of Spanish speakers or a lot of people overuse guess when they should use other options. So, for example, I have heard students say things like, I'm trying to think, because I've definitely had in class before where people overuse I guess, where they'll say like something that they're more sure of. Let me see if I can pull up some examples. So at its core, I guess is I think, but I'm not 100% sure. It softens your opinion in general. So you can use it if you're not completely sure. I guess it starts at 7. I guess she's at work. It's like, I think this, but I'm not really sure. Making a quick assumption. I guess he forgot. I guess they're busy. It's like, I imagine she forgot. I imagine they're busy. I guess he forgot. Or softening your opinion to sound less direct. Like, I guess it's a good idea. I guess we could try that. And agreeing without enthusiasm. So that's the one that I gave the example for earlier. Like, oh, do you want to go? You could be like, I guess. Meh. If you guys say that, if someone invites you somewhere and you respond, I guess, they will have the idea that you do not want to go. So be careful with that one. It's like, not really, but sure, because you asked is the idea. Spanish speakers overuse it because it comes from translating supongo que too directly. But if you use it all the time, it sounds like you're unsure about everything in English. So be careful about using it too much when you are kind of sure or you're sharing like an actual opinion that you have. I think it's better to say I wish I was there than were there. I wish I was there. I wish I were there. Technically, I wish I were there would be the subjunctive form, but it's very common to say I wish I was there. So technically both of them are fine, but were is the one that is the proper subjunctive form of, like, in the same way that with the, if I say, if I were you, I would do this. A lot of people say if I was you. So were is going to be like the proper subjunctive form, but it's very common that people say I wish I was. It's very, very common. Yeah, I think both are recognized as being correct. If you guys are like taking a test where there's a multiple choice and there's only one correct answer, then I would choose were. I mean, if your teacher is like a stickler for traditionally how it should be, but I would even venture to say could be more common. Yeah, but I was checking to see if both are recognized by, because a lot of dictionaries now recognize even with conditional forms that, like, one is the informal one versus the formal one. In the past, people would just say it's completely incorrect to say was, but now it's so common that the dictionaries work to describe the use of language. So sometimes they have to say, okay, this was incorrect in the past, but now so many people use it that we're going to say that's fine. But I want to announce, in case anyone is interested, or if you or like someone you know needs to take English classes, I have already posted my classes for next month, April. They are small group classes, B1 and B2 level. And I finished the topic schedule as well, so I'll be posting that too. And you can find those at my website, which is charmenglish.app or charmenglish.cl. Both of them lead back to me, charmenglish.app. And that link is in my bio. So I'll be posting that today. It's not a commitment, like you have to do a month of classes. You can sign up for one and see if you like it and then decide to come back again. Check that out on my website and I'll post about it on my story today. Yeah, I prefer people say what dictionaries say. Yeah, I tend to teach what the correct, like, the accepted form is because I think people want to know that. But I also think it's helpful if I say, no one says it, if I was, that would also not be giving you guys a correct idea because you're going to go into the real world and hear it and be like, Maggie said no one says this because it's incorrect. I go live on Instagram on Saturdays. Yeah, on Saturdays. And I go live on TikTok on Tuesdays. Yeah, exactly. Language is alive. All right, take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And I'll be posting this as well on my YouTube and Spotify in case you want to watch again with the words, the transcript as well. All right, have a good one. Bye. Take care.